For those that don't know me, my name is Jessica Jimenez. I am the Next Gen 911 Program Manager at Department of Military Affairs, Office of Emergency Communications. And as I mentioned, we're here today to have our Next Gen 911 outreach session, really wanting to communicate where we're at with our implementation process and some of the things going on within the Next Gen program at Office of Emergency Communications. So to start here today, I'll go through introductions. I just did introduce myself. We've got a number of presenters here that will cover a variety of topics. So to start, we did invite our AT&T partners here to present. So Troy, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see everybody here today. My name is Troy Mullis. I am the lead program manager for the state of Wisconsin ESINet deployment for AT&T. So I lead the program with all of the different stakeholders, but I'm happy to be here today with DMA.
Thanks, Troy. And then we also have some staff within our office, Zach and Grant. So I'll have you both introduce yourselves.
Yeah, my name is I'm with the communication from the military. My project is to be the lead for the GIS part of this project. The most in the various counties to get together and we don't think it's the my name is Grant Walton. For the grant program, both the radio and
Thank you both. And last, certainly not least, we do have Kim Paxton here in the room from Intrado to do a demo on the ECAT system. So let Kim introduce herself. Whoa.
Yes, my name is Kim Paxton. I'm the lead sales manager. And just mentioned I'm here to ask down board. But if you have any, just what we asked to do, please feel free to meet up with me today. I don't have to be right away after the meeting. So if we have this agenda today, which it seems like we do,
Thank you, Kim.
They can only hear you if you're right.
Okay, I will. Those were just introductions, so you didn't miss anything if you're online. So to start out, I wanted to just go through the quick agenda here. We'll be talking about quite a few items, some repeats from our past sessions. So if you've attended or maybe listened into past sessions, a lot of this information may be familiar to you. We feel this is a good opportunity to just reemphasize some of the things that are going on, not only from the implementation standpoint, but also as you're preparing for your go live. And then once you do go live with the AT&T ESINet, sort of what happens after that. So we'll go through that process, both phase 1 and phase 2, preparing for go live and what happens once you get into that phase 2 status at your PSAP. I'll then talk about, we'll take a quick break, probably 10 to 15 minutes, just depending on where we're at within our presentation, before then getting into more funding, 901 funding here at the state level and at the local level, just in terms of what sort of fee structures we have in place in Wisconsin, as well as what we use to fund our Next Gen 911 program as well. We haven't typically talked about that in the past, and I thought this might be a good opportunity to kind of explain how we fund our programs. I'll also be talking about the Next Gen 911 operational date process. Again, this is quite new. Although it has been in statute the last couple of years, we haven't been at a point in our build out that we could necessarily be determining the operational date for each county in which Next Gen 911 becomes fully operational. So this presentation will be sort of a precursor to what that process looks like as you go live with the AT&T ESINet and what the operational date means for you in your county specifically. And then last, we'll wrap up with the ECATS demo of our statewide dashboard. As PSAPs are onboarded, they're added to our dashboard. They're also added to the ECATS reporting system, which is available to everyone that has signed up for the AT&T EZNet, as well as those PSAPs that are on other networks as well. So very excited to have Kim here to provide a demo of that system. All right, so very briefly, I know many of you are familiar with the Office of Emergency Communications already, but every once in a while, someone takes on a new role and maybe haven't seen my presentation. So I do like to at least start out with some preliminary introductions, just kind of setting a baseline at the beginning of these, making sure that everyone is up to date on kind of what our office is and what is Next Gen 911. So the Office of Emergency Communications is relatively new. We were stood up back in, I believe, in 2017 with the passage of Wisconsin Act 59 and really assigned implementing Next Gen 911 to the Department of Military Affairs. So within our office, we have Eric Veal, who is appointed, he's our director, and is appointed by the Adjutant General for the state of Wisconsin. He oversees our entire office from a strategic perspective, assisting and making decisions as needed for the office as a whole. Within and directly reporting to Eric is our section chief, Molly Boss, who oversees all of the program areas within the office, as well as the personnel. Really keeps our office running. Providing assistance generally to the office is Allison Hudak. And a special shout out to her for her assistance in scheduling and getting us set up for these outreach sessions. She was a huge asset in helping me get facilities and email notices out and everything else. So thank you, Allison. Sort of getting down into the program areas of the office, we do have, I would say, 3 primary program areas. The first, of course, and I feel maybe personally the best, is the Next Gen 911 program. Sorry, guys. I am the program manager for that program, but I don't do all of this alone. We do have staff within the Next Gen 911 program, Zach and Grant, helping out with both the GIS and the grant programs we have. So really helping me and working with me from that strategic perspective, making sure we're all aligned in the Next Gen 911 program. And primarily responsible for, of course, administering the contract with AT&T for that Next Gen 911 system. Also within our office is the Public Safety Broadband and Interoperability Program that's headed up by Margaret Zeke. She does more on the training and interoperable communications side of things, more deployments, things focused on helping local resources with interoperable communications planning and training, and really a jack of all trades, essentially, in what she does. Also working a bit on the cellular public safety LTE side with FirstNet and other broadband offerings across the nation. We also have our WISCOM program. Many of you are familiar with our statewide P25 interoperable public safety radio system. That is currently undergoing a replacement to a 700, 800 megahertz radio system. And so that program is headed up by Dennis Reynolds with the assistance of Margaret Hauge within our office. And so we all keep very busy, each kind of within our own program areas, but really operate as a team, and definitely happy to be a part of that office. So getting a bit into kind of what is Next Gen 911, as I mentioned, some of you may be new to your roles within your PSAPs or within your local GIS authorities. So I just wanted to make sure always setting a baseline for what I'm talking about when I mention Next Gen 911. So Next Gen 911 or NG911 is really upgrading your legacy 911 circuit-based old telephony 911 systems into an IP-based environment, utilizing a network known as the Emergency Services IP-based network, or EZNet, ESINet, as we'll all refer to it moving forward. This really, as I mentioned, begins replacing the existing legacy 911 system. So your enhanced 911 systems you have in place today that run off of your CAMA trunks, often in your back rooms. and replaces those with these EZNet connections, which is able to deliver calls in an IP-based format. This allows for new capabilities to be implemented at the PSAP. That includes text to 911, pictures and videos to 911. Again, I always mention it's not to say we're implementing pictures and videos within our 911 system, but it's certainly something the network is capable of doing when you're ready for that. Up until this point, I've talked about 3 key components. I actually am going to throw a wrench in that and add a 4th key component here. So of the key components of NextGen 911, we try to break this into certain areas of NextGen 911. All of these things need to come together to fully realize a NextGen 911 system. And so the first, of course, the backbone EZNet system and NextGen Core Services, which we've contracted with AT&T to provide across our state. Other counties have also contracted with their own NextGen 911 providers. And so that is probably the main key component of NextGen 911 build out. The second is PSAP equipment readiness. So making sure that PSAP equipment is capable of processing IP-based calls. Typically there is what's known as SIP licensing and things that need to occur, upgrades within your call handling systems that happen to ensure that there is compatibility with the EZNet and not having to necessarily convert traffic through a gateway of some sort. The third key component, as always, the standardized GIS data. Very, very important. I see a thumbs up from Zach. Yes, it is very important when it comes down to routing our 911 calls based on location. So making sure that that GIS data is in a standard format that all systems can process and is compatible across all of our PSAPs. I mentioned this 4th key component being new. We haven't been to a point in our build out that OSP migrations has really been a topic of conversation. But since now we're talking about this whole phase 1, phase 2 process with the AT&T EZNet, the OSP migrations have become increasingly important as we're looking at a full end-to-end NextGen 911 solution. So OSP stands for Originating Service Provider. This is typically going to be your wireless, your wireline, VoIP, any kind of telecommunications provider that could, when their customer dials 911, route their call to this EZNet. And part of that process is moving their traffic, which is now going through the selective router, and moving it from that selective router on the old 901 system and over to this EZNet in order to directly route those calls into the EZNet and process them using IP-based protocols. Troy will get into that more, I think, as we go through this presentation, but keep in mind that really comes into play during that phase 2 process. At the national level, NextGen 911 is essentially happening in every single state in some way or another. The National Emergency Number Association sets the national standard for NextGen 911 systems. That's known as the I3 standard. And that's really what we build our networks to be compatible with each other in order to make sure calls can not only route within our network, but then when we're making connections with other IP-based systems that are built to that same standard, they're able to route those calls with amongst themselves or between those two systems as well, using the same standard. So we really are focused on building to that I3 standard. And when anyone really talks about a NextGen 911 standard, they're really referencing that I3 standard developed by NENA. Also at the national level, I did just want to mention the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, did just recently pass a final rule related to NextGen 911 transition. That doesn't necessarily impact the PSAPs or GIS folks around across our state. However, it will come into play more specifically on the OSP migration side, as the FCC rules really govern how those connections are being made from the OSPs that are migrating to this new system. All right. So now that you know what NextGen 911 is, just a quick overview of what the NextGen 911 program at OAC does. I mentioned the AT&T EZNet. We are primarily responsible for administering that contract for statewide NextGen 911 services. In addition to that contract, we also have a contract with GeoCom for a GIS data management service. Zach will talk a bit about that during his portion of this presentation, but that also falls within our program for administering that contract. I'll talk a bit about the operational date process. So we are responsible at DMA for determining the Next Gen 911 operational date for each county. And that is the date in which Next Gen 911 becomes fully operational within your county. And there are some impacts to what occurs when that date is determined. And again, I'll go through that a bit more in detail during this presentation. We also manage our state grant programs. That has been increasing year after year. I think we started with 2 grant programs, maybe even 1 grant program back in 2021. And then now that has just grown into now 4 grant programs, not all related to Next Gen 911, but we are now administering over $20 million annually in grant programs at the state level. So our office is responsible for that as well. Some other program initiatives, just general strategic planning, working with other PSAPs that have implemented Next Gen 911 with other providers, making sure that we're coordinating and heading down that same path and that we can transfer calls between those systems. Federal and state reporting, I mentioned the FCC, they do have a 911 fee report that we submit annually. And if anyone is interested in the full list, there is a departmental duties list in Wisconsin statute, in case you're interested in reading that. All right, so where are we with our build out? This map is as recent as it's dated September 24th. Not much has occurred since then. I will say there are a couple, I think, of PSAPs that are in the dark blue that have signed with the AT&T EZNet and have actually kicked off their meeting. I think Douglas County comes to mind. So this is in terms of like the lime green and the green striped ones, those are our PSAPs that are live on not only the AT&T EZNet, but other EZNet providers. That's probably going to be the most up-to-date information on the status map. And then everything else is just really detailing where each of those PSAPs are within their individual build out, whether or not they have a project manager assigned, what quarter of the year we're looking at for their build out. Things do change. So, as we're listing things within the status map, we're trying to keep it up to date, but things change so quickly, it can be hard to keep up. So if you do see anything in the status map that may be incorrect or that should be reflected differently, please let us know. This is now available on our website as a quick link. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's also obviously a QR code on this map in case anybody would like to use that to access this. There are other status maps on that website as well. This one is just the Next Gen 911 status map, but there are also status map for the GIS data, as well as those for our grant programs and who's received grants under those. All right, so before I pass it off to Troy for his portion of the presentation, are there any general questions about what is Next Gen 911 and kind of what I've provided here? Troy will get more into the specifics of the AT&T EZNet build out, some of the numbers and statistics that we have for the PSAPs that have gone live. All right. Hearing none, I will pass it off to Troy. And Troy, I will just ask if you could make sure you're standing by the computer so that people can hear us.
Got it.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes.
Hey, very good. Thank you, Jessica. All right, so now that Jessica's kind of went through the DMA elements, we'll go ahead and move into where we currently are from an AT&T ESINet deployment perspective. So as of today, we have completed 26 migrations, and that's approximately 28% of the total sites that will be deployed across the state of Wisconsin. The AVPN egress network, we're a little above the 80% completion rate at the moment. And this is the network that would come in from the ESINet core routing core to each individual PSAP. And then the edge router completions with the assigned PSAP migration dates. So about 52% of all of the sites that we have put dates on, we have got the routers installed. And this is a number that we move forward, weekly as we're able. Migrations assigned to project managers. We've got project managers assigned to 85% of the total sites that are left to deploy across the state. So as you can see, we still have a number of sites to do, but we're actively making sure that we're getting resources assigned to keep the assembly line rolling, so to speak. Okay, that's the just real high level on the ESINet on the ECAT side of the picture. So as we roll out ESINet, we're also rolling out ECATs. Some sites will get some ECATs work ahead of when we actually deploy ESINet. But the ECATs work right now, we have completed 29 sites, and that's 31% of the sites that we're deploying. The RDDM devices, so this is a piece of hardware that is installed at your site that is interfaced with your CPE. We have 59% of the total sites installed. And then the CDR, which is call data records. And this is where the RDDM collects the call records from your CPE and provides it to ECATs. That's ongoing with active deployment. So sometimes that CDR connectivity gets put in place while you're getting your stuff provisioned. Sometimes it happens at cut. We try and stay ahead of that. But just so you know, that's ongoing with the deployments. And then the CDR connectivity is available anytime after the RDDMs are installed. So once the ECAT team comes out and installs your RDDMs, please make sure your CPE vendors know that they can start with that connectivity at any time. Okay, and then the service assurance testing, this is actually SA testing, and but I know that there's a testing and analysis period that happens once the RDDM is installed and it's receiving CDR information. There's an analyst that sits down and goes through and makes sure they're receiving all of that data, and that's ongoing for all of the sites that have CDR connectivity completed. Okay, the AT&T ESINet implementation update. Overall sites with grant award dates are given priority, as we normally sort of build our schedule based on the grant award dates and when they need to be done. We've engaged additional escalation resources for our AVP and delivery. We've seen some challenges with that with some of our out-of-footprint partners. That's beginning to get better because we have additional resources engaged there. And some time ago, the state engaged Geocom, which is now available for GIS onboarding. And they work on helping the counties and the PSAPs get their GIS data ready and loaded into the EGDMS, which is essentially the ESINet GIS portal. And so I want to give a big shout out to Zach over here. He's been doing a great job working with the PSAPs, being that liaison with Geocom, doing some great stuff there. We do expect to put around an additional 10 PSAPs on net this year. And then we're obviously planning on our 2025 schedule daily. We're trying to get dates established for everything moving forward. And here's what we'll say. Long-term planning is still recommended for all deployment resources and deliverables. So this is kind of on both sides. So we plan long-term, we're looking at our schedule a year out, right? So we're trying to make sure that we have everything in place. We would strongly recommend for each of the PSAPs to do the same. Be looking at that long-term plan, be talking with your CPE provider about going to ESINet, what that provisioning effort looks like. Sometimes the sites will need to do a hardware refresh. Maybe it's just a provisioning effort, but just keeping that top of mind as you plan and as you get closer to ESINet deployment. Okay, so the ORT, which is operational readiness testing and deployment schedules, still have some capacity for fourth quarter for some of the sites that are still in the planning phase, trying to get dates established. We still have a small window of opportunity for those particular sites to get their dates from their CPE providers, get with us, and get deployed this year. Okay, so as PSAPs migrate to ESINet, or we're going to call that on-net, you're going to hear that term a lot. You're going to hear on-net, off-net, that sort of thing. But once you get to ESINet, full on-net transfer capabilities are going to continue to increase. So what does that mean? Well, as additional PSAPs are placed on net, all of those PSAPs that you're going on net with, you'll have full transfer capability with, meaning you can transfer a call to them, they can transfer a call to you. You're going to get the full Annie and Ally on that particular 911 call. And this is particularly helpful for those that have had different providers, different legacy providers over the years. So if you were an AT&T customer and your county next door was a Frontier or a CenturyLink or whomever, typically those legacy solutions were islands. You could really only transfer at a full 911 level with the selective router and the PSAPs associated with it. So once we get everybody on net, you wouldn't really want to do this, have a need, but you could literally transfer the call to the other end of the state to a PSAP that's on net, and they're going to get the Annie Alley, the whole 9 yards. So what it does, it just opens up a lot of opportunities to get those full transfers in place so that you can get that call fully transferred with all of the information. Okay, so Jessica did touch on OSP migration, and this is just a bullet. We'll get into it a little bit more later on in the deck. But originating service provider trunking will be migrated directly to AT&T ESINet after phase 1 migrations have begun. So pretty much everything that we're doing today is a phase 1 migration. So everything at the selective router, we're just pivoting that traffic up to ESINet, but the OSPs are still sitting back behind the selective routers. Our phase 2 would be the process to move all of those providers away from those legacy selective routers directly to ESINet. So at that point, it's another step forward in eliminating all of the old legacy 911 elements that are in the network today. Okay, so what are the benefits? Here are a few highlights that we put together. You're going to get faster call delivery via the IP networks versus your old analog camera trunks. We've talked to a number of sites, and this kind of happens across the nation where they've noticed that typically if they were to call in, they might get 2 to 4 rings before the dispatch console actually rings in the legacy environment. But once they get to ESINet, it might be a half a ring or a ring and the console's ringing. So the IP networks are obviously dynamic and a lot faster in routing those calls and getting those calls to the PSAP. The AVPN also offers a lot of dynamic routing in regards to failures and disaster recovery, whereas the old TDM network was a little more linear, right? It was very straightforward. The AVPN network is very dynamic in how it can route calls and get them to your PSAPs. You're going to notice in a lot of ways improved call clarity and audio on the ESINet because it's IP. And so I don't know, across the years, I've noticed that in some PSAPs, you might get static and you might get noise and humming and all kinds of different things on your camera trunks. That will dissipate and go away when you transition to AT&T ESINet, just due to the fact you're going to be on IP. Obviously, you're going to have improved call routing based on the i3 capabilities and reducing the number of wireless transfers. So the i3 world, once you go i3 and you're doing spatial routing, which we're doing in the state, the ESINet is looking where that call is actually originating from, where it's at. In the old legacy days, a lot of times it would route by tower. So it's, if I make a call and I'm near the county line and I hit a tower in the adjacent county, I'm going to go to that county PSAP, and then they're going to transfer me back to where I need to be. In the i3 world with GIS spatial routing, that call is actually going to be routed based on where I'm standing or where I'm sitting or wherever the case may be. It's going to get me to the proper PSAP faster. Okay, and then as you work through going live, you work through your ORT, your operational readiness testing, and I'll just put a plug in for ORT. That's a testing period before you go live. So there's about a 49-step process, and I'll mention it down here, where you work through ORT to make sure you're ready to go. But as you're going through that, you might want to let folks around you know what's going on, just in case there's some test transfers or some calls that might go to their site through the testing. Okay, and then to touch on ORT, most of your ORT sessions are going to run somewhere between 3 and 5 days. We've seen some of them finish in a day and a half. We've seen some of them go 2 weeks. So it really just depends on some of the challenges that the ORT team might face in getting everything tested and turned up. And it's a pretty lengthy test plan. So it's about 49 steps. And we have to pass all of them to certify you for go live. What we would ask is that a resource that is familiar with the PSAP help us with ORT during, test calls during the ORT. And that could be somebody in your PSAP. It could even be your CPE vendor if they're available. Whomever is available to help us. That's a big help when we go through ORT. So then once we actually do the migration, we get on a bridge, everybody's ready to go. We have all of the resources there. The migration will usually take 1 to 2 hours. Now that's the migration to get the traffic off of legacy over to ESINet. There may be a host of other things that have to be done if you're refreshing your CPE and using the migration to ESINet as an opportunity to go to your new CPE. You may have another few hours getting your admin lines moved over and so on and so forth. If it's just existing equipment that you're actually moving your traffic to, typically you're going to be in that 1 to 2 hours. So typically, again, I've seen these go anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour and a half, couple hours, and you're good to go. Okay, so we do want to touch on alternate routes and transfers along the way. So when you sit down with your PM and you talk about, okay, I'm going to ESINet, I want to see what my alternate route can do or how I want it to look. Just keep in mind as you map it out and you understand who you wanting to alternate route to, understand what happens to that traffic if they're busy, okay? And that kind of leads to the first bullet. Creating alternate routes could produce unexpected results. So just be careful when you're looking at your alternate routing planning, make sure you're not creating a mad loop. You know, you're alternate routing to a PSAP next door to you. And in times past, you know, they were overflowing to you. You got to be careful with that loop. So just, that's come up a time or two. So just be cognizant of that as you work through your plans. So again, review your alternate route destinations ahead of migration, just to understand the call flow. And again, just review how that would look in the event that it did get put into motion. And then consider MOUs with your other counties. If you haven't done that, it might be best to sit down and do that, get an understanding and something signed between those counties that say, hey, look, I'm going to alternate route to you. Are you good with that? You all agree. It's really helpful because ESINet will automatically alternate route if you go offline, and they will start receiving that traffic. So just as long as you all are on the same page, I think that's really best. And we've always recommended that MOUs are in place for the PSAPs that are working in concert together. Okay, and then just a bullet to review your alternate route engagement, alternate backup options. We talked about that. And then as we move forward, as I mentioned before, the on-net transfers are going to improve as we get more PSAPs on. Okay, so the more PSAPs we get on there, the more sites that can receive the Annie and Alley based on transfers either way. Okay, so these alternate route and transfers, they're going to involve off and on-net PSAPs while we're in transition. So what does that mean? Again, if I'm on an alternate provider that's not AT&T, and I move to on-net, the transfers there will probably look a little different until the PSAPs remaining on the old LSR on the alternate provider are moved to on-net. So for those that are on an alternate provider other than AT&T in the legacy world today, once you move to on-net, you may be working with some PSTN transfers until we get everybody on net, okay? And it's because you're leaving that world and you're coming up to ESINet. And then once we get everybody up to ESINet, then everything will be very seamless and everybody will get full information. But in that time period, there may be times where there's going to be some PSTN transfers that need to be utilized to get everybody on net at some point. Okay.
Hey, Troy.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. There was a question in the chat, and I thought it maybe be a good time since you're talking about transfers. The question from Christine was, will the 10-digit numbers and SIP URI codes be shared with all PSAPs for replacing the star codes? We'd like to keep up with programming our transfers. Perhaps they were sent out and I missed it. Many of our neighbors have completed the process, and we program far and wide in our speed dial. And I think, from the ESINet perspective, once a PSAP comes onto the ESINet and then their I3, they're provided the star codes for their neighboring PSAPs or anything when they would like to transfer to. So they would have, all those new SIP URIs replacing the star codes as that PSAP comes onto the network. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Troy.
No,
know
but
we
I
share
appreciate
that.
you catching it. No, thank you, Brian. I appreciate you catching that. And I think it's, is it Christine that has a question?
Yep.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Christine. If not, throw another question in at us.
And Christine, I'm sorry. There's another question, Troy. I don't know if you saw that.
I see it. Yeah, we have had some neighbors provide them and others not even know what they are. And that is true. So if you're on an AT&T, if you're an AT&T legacy customer today, those star codes, we can go back and figure out what those transfers are. If you're on an alternate provider, you'll just need to ask that alternate provider what those numbers are based behind that star code. Now, you could always just go to the other locations that you're going to be transferring to and get a good PSTN, and we can use that. But there are instances I know where folks have star codes built in their CPE and they have no idea what's behind them. So that's valid. I'm sorry. It's a public switch telephone network. So PSTN is 10-digit number. Going into their admin lines, it's just an admin line, just a 10-digit phone number is basically what that is. Good question. Thank you. Okay. And I'll hand it off to Zach. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Troy. Okay, so, I came here today to. Let's stand by that. I see. That's right. Otherwise, you can't hear me. I've got just a few things I wanted to touch on today. Starting on what you might need to get ready for, get your GIS data ready to do for getting ready for ORT and go live. I know we have a lot of counties that are either in the middle of getting their data together or are about ready to go live themselves. So just kind of want to do a quick reminder of what some of the things you got to look out for, kind of be a little more focused on as you get closer to this these dates. Just kind of first off, GIS data should be completed as soon as possible, just to allow for a lot more time for integration to the ESINet and to make sure that it's all ready to go for ORTs and go live dates. The more lead time you got on this is going to be the better. You have to remember that, our work on the GIS side of this project can be a block for the entire county to go live on NG911. We haven't had that happen yet. And a lot of credit goes to the folks who've been working hard on their data across the state to make sure that hasn't happened, but it is still a possibility. So please, do your GIS data early and often to get it ready to go. Polygons need to be critical error free at least 2 weeks prior to ORT. The reason for that is that during the ORT, they're going to be doing test calls, as Troy mentioned earlier, based on the polygons that are submitted by the GIS folks, your LIOs across the state. So when they're going to be doing a test call somewhere around the county, and they need to make sure that the data that is represented in those polygons, the PSAP, the fire, law, EMS, those agencies' information is coming up during the ORT into the call center to make sure that's worked. So we need at least 2 weeks before ORT to make sure it can properly get into the proper emergency call routing function or ECRF of the ESINet to make sure that it's getting in there.
Road center line should be submitted at least a month before go live, and again, as soon as you can is gonna be better than not. The reason for this is, as we all know, kind of the Achilles heel, the real, big hurdle we often have on the GI side of this project are the alley comparisons. The alley comparisons done against the road center lines. Oftentimes, the only remedy for some of these issues is dealing with, fixing the MSAG in the alleys themselves, because the GIS data is actually correct and ready to go, but the MSAGs in the alleys just aren't quite up to snuff, weren't maintained, whatever's going on with them. And that's a lot of back and forth between a lot of different organizations and different people. That can take a bit of time. So give yourself as much lead time as possible on that, but at least a month prior to go live is a good rule of thumb. Site structure address points should also be submitted also in a timely manner. They're not being compared against the alley directly, but they do provide a lot of valuable information for dispatchers at the when calls do come in. And last but not least, at least on this slide, if you feel that you are kind of falling behind on some of these goals, if you're not going to be able to quite make it, as far as the timeline goes, speak up sooner rather than later. If you're already working with Geocom, talk to Geocom. If you need to come talk to me, by all means. Emailing me is usually the best way to get hold of me. I'm very diligent about answering emails at least 1 or 2 days after I get them. So please, any comments, questions, concerns, bring them up, bring them to me. We're here to help. Also wanted to mention again what's going on with Geocom and their NG9 GIS data management services contract that we have with them here at the state. They're going to be moving into an ongoing operational support phase of their project. Basically, what this means is that they kind of laid the foundation for what they're going to be doing for us here at the state of Wisconsin. And they're going to be kind of moving some of the higher ranking personnel they got, like Jessica Fry and folks like that, more off the project. She'll still be around, be able to help out when things come in, but you're more likely to hear from their support team on day-to-day kind of uploads and QA issues and things like that. Jessica's still going to be around to help out when need be, but you're also going to be hearing from these support groups. So from the county side of things, you really shouldn't notice too much, really any difference in the level of support and service that you're going to be getting from Geocom. I also just want to take a moment to kind of emphasize and encourage folks that haven't signed up for Geocom services yet to go ahead and do that as soon as you can. They've been very, very helpful to the folks that have. They are the preferred way that we're going to be having data submitted to the EGDMS for the continuance of this whole project, or as long as we're going to be using, this particular setup for NG911 across the state. They're providing a lot of great QA and kind of bringing that everyone's data, not just up to kind of EGDMS standard, but actually up to the NENA standard and our actual Wisconsin NG911 standard, which is quite a bit higher. And that's going to help out with interoperability and make sure that we can all work together with this data across the state and eventually even across state lines. So I very much encourage you to do that. If for whatever reason you're just not able to get your data to the point where you're ready to submit it, I would at least encourage you to submit a provisioning boundary if you haven't. The reason being is that the Geocom has been very, very helpful with getting that particular hurdle out of the way for a lot of people. We knew when we started this whole project that edge matching between the counties is going to be a big problem. So Geocom's really stepped up and helping out with a provisioning boundary layer to kind of see those problems firsthand right off the bat. And I know a lot of you probably with me, hey, Zach, you asked for that last year. Why can't we just use that? Send in another one. Things change, boundaries change. Let's just make sure we got the freshest data we can to get these edge matching issues taken care of off the bat. Just want to quickly point out, so here's the counties that have signed up for Geocom's NG911 GIS data management services so far. If you see your county in white here and you think that might be a mistake or something like that, I would just double check. Make sure your data got submitted correctly. Make sure you got a user permission form sent in to Geocom or myself so we can get that signed. Maybe someone got lost in the mix, somewhere like that, who knows? But if you're in white and you think that's a mistake and you think you should have an active GIS data hub account ready to go, even if you're not very active in it, double check, see what's going on. If you're in white and you haven't had a chance to get that in, again, please encourage you to do so. More than happy to help you out with that any way I can. Last slide before I hand it back over to Troy. Here's the counties that, in pink, we have the counties that have actually given over provisioning boundaries so far for edge matching. Again, this has been very, very helpful. And the folks over in green, those are the counties that have actually completed all their GIS data work with Geocom and are actually 100% critical area free for their service polygons and for center lines. Left out the side address points on this particular analysis, but that data is all ready to go. So as you can see, we are kind of getting there. As Troy mentioned before, we have 28% of the counties and PSAPs are live across the state. We kind of represent that here a little better than that here on this display. So, you know, it's a lot of hard work still have to go, but we've really made a lot of good progress. So please keep that up. So see if there's any questions. Not seeing any specific to GIS coming up. So I guess with that, I can hand it back over to Troy. Thanks.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about once you're live on ESINet and you move into the life cycle portion of your service. So AT&T is available to assist with maintenance issues that impact the network components, the AT&T network components, or the AT&T supported call handling equipment. That's 24/7, 365. So as you can see here, you'll be given the number to our 911 resolution center. For those of you that are legacy AT&T customers today, you'll recognize that's a service that we've offered for many, many years, and that will also continue as you transition to ESINet. And so again, if you're already a 911 customer with AT&T, it's pretty much BAU. For any of you that will be joining the AT&T ESINet service from other providers, we're going to provide you a leave behind document that will provide all this information, and you'll have it on hand in the event that you need us to engage on a service issue. So it's really important that when you have an issue that you do call us and let us know that you're having issues so that a ticket can be generated. We can also provide you an express ticketing option, and this particular well, let me back up. So when you issue a ticket, you want to make sure that you're giving your PSAP name, your address. We want to confirm all of the information that we have on file for you when you call in to get a ticket. If you know somebody at AT&T, we ask that you don't call them or text them or email them. We ask that you call our support numbers so that we can get your ticket put in there and it can get the proper attention. If there's somebody at AT&T that you know and you're contacting outside of that process, the likelihood of you getting your issue resolved could be really delayed, and we certainly wouldn't want any of that. So just make sure that you're providing all the pertinent data, your PSAP, your location, what trouble you're having, etc. Before I go forward, there is an option to do some express ticketing, and our PMs can talk you through that. It's best that you call the resolution center when you're having an issue. The issue with express ticketing is that, you know, if you're having really a non-service impacting issue, you can use that. But if you're having a service impacting issue, we want you to call the 911 resolution center to get that ticket issued. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about phase one. And so this is the process where we take you live to ESINet and what we would consider the first step. And so you'll notice in this picture that you've got the what we would consider the originating service providers up top of the legacy selective router there. And then you'll see that SS7 network that's crossing over to AT&T ESINet. So when we take you live on phase one, we're actually still working through that legacy selective router and sending your calls on ahead to AT&T ESINet. Now, it's not depicted in this picture, but in your current legacy environment, you would have trunks that come out of that legacy selected router and will go over to your PSAP, and they would be terminated there where calls would be delivered to the PSAP. And so right now, the number of PSEPs that we have on is, I think I said 26, and here are your 26 that have been delivered and migrated to AT&T ESINet. And so the originating service providers that currently provide service in these communities are encouraged to begin planning phase two. We did have a meeting with a lot of the OSPs this past week, and we strongly encourage them to start establishing trunking for these particular counties. So once we get the counties migrated, that's when the OSPs can begin their work to get their trunking directly into AT&T ESINet for the counties that are migrated, so such that we can get the traffic migrated away from the legacy selective router. Now, this process, once the OSPs engage and they start getting their trunking in place and they get to a point where they can migrate traffic, it's really a wide swath here. It can be anywhere from 6 to 18 months based on how aggressive the OSPs want to get with establishing that particular trunk. And here's what that phase two looks like. So when the OSPs do engage, you'll see in this particular diagram, the legacy selective router is gone. So once the traffic is migrated, the originating service providers will be sending traffic directly into AT&T ESINet, and they have a couple of different options today. They can use the TDM SS7 network, or they can use the IP SIP option. We strongly recommend that they swing towards a SIP, an IP SIP option, because that gets you all set up for an end-to-end I3 solution sometime in the future. We've all got to get to an end-to-end I3 solution sometime in the future, and we can't do that with any of the TDM elements in the network. Okay, so phase two, what to expect? LOA. So some of you in the room have probably been receiving some emails from me about LOAs, letter of authorization. So a letter of authorization is requested by certain originating service providers for migration directly to AT&T ESINet. And really what that LOA does is it provides basically permission or the authority for those OSPs to move traffic on your behalf directly to ESINet. They're moving the traffic away from the selective routers directly to ESINet. We'll be requesting the LOAs along the way during and after deployments, and that's the process that I'm in now. So again, those of you that are receiving emails from me, this is all just part of that particular process. Generally, if I get one single LOA signed for the county, that'll do it. I can send that across to whichever OSP is requested, and that pretty much checks the box. What I'm doing is I'll provide the language and the template, and then what we're asking the PSAPs to do, take the template and the language and put it on the county or municipality letterhead, and then make sure that it has an actual signature. Okay, make sure that whomever is the authority, whether it's a director, whether it's whomever, sign it. Make sure that the letterhead with the language is signed, and then return that to me. If you can do it in 7 days after I've made the request, that's good. I know everybody's busy and can't always do it. So just as timely as you're able to do that, and then I can get the OSPs to work. Okay, I think that's back to Jessica.
Any questions for Troy on the phase one, phase two process and some of the requirements looking into phase two?
Okay. Sure.
So we're gonna pick the LOA that you sent.
Mhm.
That's cool. We sent it back.
Mhm.
Yeah, we don't even have a project manager assigned, more than 15%. Phase one that doesn't even have a project manager, so. Are y'all not talking to each other? Or like, how does this work globally going forward for?
Do you want to repeat the
Right.
question
Yeah,
first?
yeah.
So then-
Okay, so you've gone phase one. What, which county are you? Winnebago. Okay, so let me walk you through that. So once you get a project manager assigned, then you'll start working on phase one. So the project manager will host weekly, bi-weekly, whatever calls, get you through phase one. And then once you go to phase two, then we notify the OSPs, and then we work on your behalf with the OSPs to get that traffic migrated on a phase two level. Yeah, we're trying to get it done ahead of time. That's correct. Right. We're trying to just do some work out ahead. That way we can have it all in place. And then when you folks go phase one, then you can kind of get on with your business and we can work the back end with all of the OSPs. So your question was in regards to receiving the LOA before you've ever gone phase one. And again, the answer is we're just trying to work ahead. You're very open.
Good question.
Mhm.
Alrighty, not seeing any more questions here. I'm gonna wrap up with one more slide here before our break. This is more just a reminder about our Wisconsin participation agreement. So as for those of you that were around maybe 3 years ago, we went through this whole process of, if you're interested in joining, please sign this participation agreement. So I did just want to reemphasize the importance of that participation agreement because it will govern a lot of the things that are going on, not only in your implementation phase, but once we get into the more maintenance and operational phase, when we're getting into the OSP migrations, the participation agreement has a component in there called the attachment 1, which is the party obligations. And that really outlines the responsibilities of all three parties under this agreement, the three parties being the PSAP as the participant, the state being DMA, and then AT&T as the network provider. So just a reminder that within that attachment, it does outline not only the responsibilities of the PSAP, but also the state and AT&T as we're getting through each of these different phases. Troy mentioned the LOA, the letter of authorization. That is also outlined as a participant responsibility within that participation agreement. So I did just want to remind everyone, if you haven't looked at it in the last couple of years since you originally signed it, it's just a good refresher to kind of read through that. Make sure not only you're fulfilling your responsibilities, but if you feel that the state and AT&T are not fulfilling our responsibilities under that agreement, please do reach out to me and we can definitely address that. So just a reminder there, if you don't have a copy, I have a copy of everyone's participation agreement. So I'd be more than happy to provide that to you if you need it. All right, so we are at our break. I did just want to pause here to make sure there weren't any final questions about the AT&T EZNet, the participation agreement, what is Next Gen 911, because the second half of our presentation will focus more in on the funding as well as the operational date process and ECAT. So are there any remaining questions before we break? All right, seeing none, I think we will break until 2:15. Wow, 2 o'clock on the dot. I think we have enough time for a 15-minute break to get through the rest of our presentation here. So if everyone could come back around 2:15, that would be wonderful. Thank you. All right, for everyone on Teams, we are back from the break. This next portion of the presentation will focus a lot more on the funding aspect of Next Gen 911. In relation to not only grants, but also just how we're funding everything under the Next Gen 911 program. 1 second. There we go. All right. So there's been a lot of questions swirling around about 911 fees here in the state of Wisconsin. In other states, a 911 fee is typically what's used to fund 911 services across those respective states. Not every state has a state level 911 fee, but a majority of them do have 911 fees. So here in Wisconsin, the 911 funding and 911 fee landscape is a bit confusing, we'll say. So I did just want to take a moment to kind of talk through the differences between the two different fees that we have here in the state of Wisconsin and some of the changes that have recently occurred with what was formerly the police and fire protection fee. So here in the state, we have two separate and distinct 911 fees. The first is the 911 surcharge, and that is something that has been in place for a number of years and levied under county ordinance, which was authorized by state statute for establishing county-wide 911 systems. This originally occurred with basic 911 and has evolved into what is now enhanced 911. And this 911 surcharge is, as I mentioned, authorized by county ordinance. It is identified in your county contract that you have for your existing 911 services. It is up to 40 cents on all landline customer bills. That up to 40 cents is based on the number of access lines within a county, as well as the population of that county. Based on the population, the fee is maxed out at up to 40 cents. If you're in a more populated county, typically that's maxed out at, I want to say 25 cents. So it's much lower in more populous counties. And again, that's calculated based on the number of access lines within the county, as well as the costs associated with those landline providers and your county 911 provider for providing the enhanced 911 service. That up to 40 cents that's billed on those landline customer bills is then pooled by the county 911 service provider and redistributed out to participating landline providers that are charging that fee on their customer bill. No portions of that 911 surcharge is allocated to DMA for Next Gen 911. It is also not reverted to the county in any form outside of to pay for those service provider costs for providing that system. Where the landline surcharge or the 911 surcharge is maxed out, they actually are, the service providers are able to bill that county to make up the difference. So a lot of times, with basic 911 services, the landline fee was enough to cover those charges. When enhanced 911 came about, adding alley database, phase 1, phase 2 information with your calls, typically there was not enough revenues generated from that fee to cover the cost to provide your county's 911 system. In which case, those service providers then bill you a monthly recurring charge, typically for your wireless 911 trunks, your camera trunks that are coming in and delivering those wireless calls. So again, to reiterate, no portion of that 911 surcharge is allocated to DMA for 911 services under the Next Gen 911 contract, and it is also not provided to the county in any form. It is essentially what we call a bill and keep practice by the landline providers within your counties, where the fee has been authorized. The other 911 fee that we have, many of you are familiar with this as the police and fire protection fee. That was recently renamed as of this year to be the 911 fee, not to be confused with the 911 surcharge, which funds your existing county 911 systems. This in the past has been reverted to the general fund and used for shared revenue, which is distributed by the legislature out to the counties and municipal governments for their purposes and costs associated with running government affairs. With the renaming of that fee, I believe there was some changes made to the shared revenue at the state level. I'm not up to date on what those changes were. But as part of those changes, they did rename the police and fire protection fee into the 911 fee. That is a 75-cent charge on all communications connections. So really anything with an assigned telephone number, that could be your wireless, your wireline, VoIP. We all pay it on our cellular bills every month on the 75 cents. And then if you have prepaid wireless, you do pay 38 cents per prepaid wireless transaction. That fee is administered by the Public Service Commission and collected by the Department of Revenue. So those telecommunications providers register with the Department of Revenue and submit those fees then to that agency. And it is then a portion of that fee is allocated to DMA to fund Next Gen 911 activities. I bring these up because at the Next Gen 911 program, we are responsible for reporting to the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, on the usage of 911 fees in the state. Every state is required or highly recommended to submit that report to the FCC every year. And so with this upcoming report for next year, we will now be reporting the 911 fee, formerly police and fire protection fee, as a 911 fee for the purposes of that FCC report. What the FCC does with that is they review the usage of those 911 fees, making sure that they're used for 911 purposes. If they find that state has not used those 911 fees for specific 911 purposes that they have identified, or in this case, non-911 purposes, they will classify that state as being a diverter. And that essentially means that that state has diverted 911 fees to non-911 purposes, and typically leads to ineligibility for federal 911 grant dollars. There are no existing 911 grant programs at the federal level today, so that's not much of an impact if we were to be registered as diverters. But when the 2019 federal 911 grant program was around, if we couldn't certify that we used all of our 911 fees for 911 purposes, we would technically be ineligible for those grant funds. So it's very important that we continue to monitor and make sure that, you know, these 911 fees are going to their intended purposes. And if you have any questions, I'm certainly not the expert in the 911 fees. Neither NDMA does not administer or is in any way involved in the administration of 911 fees here in Wisconsin, but through years of just asking the right questions, I think we've generated enough knowledge to at least be able to share the basics of the 911 fees and what they're used for within the state. So more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Also, Public Service Commission and Department of Revenue, who administer that other 911 fee or the police and fire protection fee, are a resource for questions on the usage of those fees as well. So I mentioned we use a portion of the 911 fee, formerly the police and fire protection fee, for funding our Next Gen 911 program area. There is a Next Gen 911 state appropriation, and that's used for pretty much everything at our office that involves Next Gen 911. In particular, probably our highest costing activities right now are our grant programs. So the annual PSAP and GIS grant programs, with over 20 million available for those grant programs each year. We also use that state appropriation to pay for our statewide EZNet and Next Gen core services with the AT&T EZNet contract, as well as the ECATS reporting system, which provides 911 call data for our PSAPs that are operating on the EZNet or other Next Gen 911 provider. We also have our Geocom contract. So we pay for Geocom services and the GIS data management service out of that state appropriation, as well as for the state 911 subcommittee to administer its duties, which are identified in statute, and then some OEC Next Gen 911 personnel costs to come out of that appropriation as well. So this is really what OEC uses our 911 funding, our Next Gen 911 state appropriation on. And that revenue source, or that source of the state appropriation, is that 911 fee, formerly the police and fire protection fee. Any questions on the fees before I get into more specific Next Gen 911 system costs? All right. Very good. So I haven't covered costs in a while, so I figured this might be a good time to really talk about, just as a reminder of kind of what DMA is covering under the state contract and other Next Gen 911 activities, as well as what the PSAPs continue to be responsible for in terms of costs for the Next Gen 911 system. So generally, DMA does pay the monthly recurring and annual costs related to the AT&T EZNet service. That includes the call access network, the core network provided by Intrado, as well as the PSAP connections or those AVPN connections that AT&T is delivering to your PSAP. Those monthly recurring costs are identified in the contract per PSAP, and when they're accepted onto the system, that is when DMA begins to pay that monthly recurring charge for that PSAP. If design plans change, we may need to look at contract amendments, but generally what we're covering under the contract is included as part of that monthly recurring charge. Once you go live with the EZNet, there is, as Troy mentioned, that support phase where there is the network operations center, the trouble ticketing process and everything. That is covered under our monthly recurring charge for each of the PSAPs. So that network maintenance and any upgrades that are necessary as we continue to evolve the system would be covered under that, as well as the management of the system, ensuring everything is operating properly. There are monthly recurring charges associated with the ECATS reporting system, which includes the wireless routing analysis. The wireless routing analysis may not be as relevant as we get into Next Gen 911, and calls are being routed based on the GIS data versus the tower site location. However, that is an extra module we've added to the ECATS reporting system until we have our GIS data to a point where all of our calls are being routed based on that data. And speaking of GIS data, we also pay an annual cost for Geocom's Next Gen 911 GIS data management service. So moving into more specific costs related to the PSAPs, you continue to be responsible for costs that you've already paid for up until this point today. Your call handling and other PSAP specific equipment and upgrades and replacements. Each of your major call handling, your CAD, your recording systems, they all have end of life replacement cycles. So those continue to be the responsibility of the PSAP. We do have grant funding available to assist with those equipment upgrades and life cycle replacements. But again, that is not something that that DMA is authorized to cover under our monthly recurring charges for the Next Gen 911 system, and it continues to be a responsibility of the PSAP. Getting into more specific costs related to the transition, call handling vendor technical support during that transition. So the ORT and the migration process typically has some costs associated with your call handling vendor offering or providing support during that process. There's a lot of technical things that go into configuring your call handling system. So having them on site or at least remote to help support that transition is really important. We're also finding that your recording vendor and your CAD vendor will also need to be engaged to make sure that data is reparsed into the new format for CAD systems. So that if your call handling system is integrated with your CAD system, making sure that that data is flowing between the two systems. And then for your recorder, you want to make sure that that you have the proper licensing with your recording vendor to process and record IP-based calls. Before AT&T is able to activate their EZNet on at your PSAP facility, there's also site remediation that may be required. Many of you have already gone through your site survey process. They've already identified some of the areas that you do need to remediate in order to go live with the AT&T EZNet. Many times it comes down to, do you have server room space? Do you have a rack? Do you have electrical, twist lock outlets, things like that, that really just go to helping ensure the redundancy and the, reliability of the system from end to end at your site. And so all of that is identified in the site survey, which is presented to you from your AT&T project manager. And then last, as you migrate over to the AT&T EZNet, there are other costs associated with Next Gen 911 features. So in particular, we think of text to 911. The AT&T EZNet is able to transport those text messages, but the actual licensing that may be involved with your call handling vendor, as well as the text control center costs, are still the responsibility of the PSAP. These are typically going to be one-time setup costs with your vendors, as well as monthly recurring charges for that text control center. We currently have Intrado integrated as a text control center for the AT&T EZNet. There are other text control center options available. They just may not be fully integrated with the AT&T EZNet at this time. And then as we move beyond text to 911, if your community is ready to, say, take on pictures and videos, there are call handling vendors that are starting to offer video and pictures to 911. Those would also be features that would be the responsibility of the PSAP to implement. We provide the network necessary for PSAPs to implement Next Gen 911, but it's ultimately your decision on what kinds of features and functions you want to enable on the system. Maybe your community isn't ready for text to 911 or pictures or videos. So it's really, your decision on when you want to start implementing these features. I do encourage you, though, if you're interested in implementing text to 911, to work with your project manager. If you have one assigned with AT&T, they are more than happy to integrate that text to 911 implementation with your EZNet transition and get the testing done during that process. So if you're interested in implementing text as part of your EZNet transition, we do have some PSAPs that are doing that, and we'd be more than happy to enable that as well with your project. Are there any questions on monthly or just Next Gen 911 system costs in general before we get into the grant programs? All right. Seeing none in the chat either, I will then pass it off to Grant to go through some of the grant projects. Grant programs. Yeah.
Is it just the,
Yeah, that's
all right. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. So a little breakdown on the FY25 grant programs. For the PSAP FY25 grant program, we received 45 applications totaling 14 million in state funds. The project period is going to start December 1st. We had an $18 million funding amount available to us and a 10% local match. As you can see in the bottom, we are currently evaluating the award packages, and those will be sent out by the end of October. For the FY25 GIS grant program, we have 48 applications totaling 5.2 million in state funds. And again, the project period is going to be December 1st to June 1st, 2026. This funding level amount was 6 million, and it was a 5% local match. And again, October or end of October, we are anticipating sending out the award packages. A little breakdown of the two new radio grant programs that were released September 11th of this year. The FY25 daily use radio grant program has a $1.4 million funding amount for FY25. Of this, 20% local match, and it is for public safety interoperable communication system upgrades for local units of government whose agencies or entities are daily users of the Wisconsin system. The following daily use agencies that are eligible to apply are Florence County, Kewaunee County, and the city of Fond du Lac for this grant round. And then the application period is going to be September 11th to January 9th, 2025. For the FY25 interoperable radio grant program, it's $600,000 funding amount with a $50,000 max award amount per applicant. Again, it's a 20% match, and it's going to be, again, for public safety interoperable communication upgrades, system upgrades for local units of government whose agencies or entities are part of the interoperable users of the Wisconsin system. And again, this is going to be prioritizing the southeast region of Wisconsin for just this grant round. And it is, again, for September 11th to January 9th, 2025. Are there any questions? All right, seeing no questions, I'm going to pass it back to Jess.
I think we're probably gonna go, we went through this. I thought we had a lot. Oh, we do have a question from Gail, if you wanna, I think you can come off mute.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious, for the Next Gen 911 grant, since the applications didn't meet the full amount that's available for that grant, will that be like a second phase of reopen for applications for the remaining amount?
We are looking at a couple options right now to see what to do with that extra remaining funds. Nothing is solidified yet. I believe the 911 subcommittee is going to be voting on a couple options coming later this October.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Any other questions on the grant programs that Grant talked through? All right, hearing none, I gotta grab my paper again. So one more grant program, actually, I wanted to talk through, and this is still very preliminary. It was recently passed this year and not necessarily available for our local stakeholders. It will be available for our incumbent local exchange carriers, which formerly known as ILECs. These are typically your landline providers, very small telco providers within your counties. The state statute did establish this recent grant program for reimbursing ILEC costs associated with the essentially the phase 2 transition that AT&T does with their EZNet. So migrating those ILECs to the AT&T EZNet involves some costs, a lot of costs, just as your transition to the AT&T EZNet costs money as well. So part of this grant program is to reimburse costs associated with that IP-based transport for Next Gen 911. So that's going to be the connections from the ILEC's central office out to AT&T's points of interconnection for the EZNet using IP-based transport. It can also be used for the database used for Next Gen 911. So in Enhanced 911, we have our ALI database and our MSAG database. Those are all used to validate locations and provide you with location information when a 911 call is made. In Next Gen 911, this includes what's known as the location information server, or a LIS. I am not familiar with any state or originating service provider or ILEC that currently has a LIS available. But it is what will be essentially the replacement for the ALI database as we get into the full Next Gen 911 environment. We're talking very long term, so you'll continue to use your ALI until such time as these ILECs and other originating service providers have established the list or the database used for Next Gen 911. And then generally it can be used for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of Next Gen 911 equipment. So as you can see, the current grant purposes are very general. And so we are working with our 911 subcommittee to get recommendations on appropriate grant purposes that fit within these categories of costs identified in statute. And they will be discussing this at their October meeting, and likely at a following meeting. We're hoping to get recommendations from them relatively soon, because then DMA will take those recommendations and develop a policy for administering this grant program. More information to come, as we have it. As I mentioned, there's not a direct impact to the PSAPs or the land information offices or people working on the GIS data, but this will be something that is kind of running in parallel to the grant programs that we have available for at the local level. So last point here, timeline is to be determined, obviously contingent on the 911 subcommittee making those recommendations, and then the time it takes us to develop that policy. All right. Before I move into operational data, just want one last chance to ask any questions about 911 funding and the grant programs. All right. Well, we're almost to the end of our presentation here today. This last topic before we get to ECATS is I'm going to try to keep it very high level. There's The reason we haven't really spoken about this up until this point, not only has it not been relevant, but it's also just a complex topic that has a lot of different moving parts within each county and within, sort of what DMA is doing with the Next Gen 911 system. So to give a little bit of history around the Next Gen 911 operational date, I'll just start with, as I mentioned, with the funding that is involved at the county level for your enhanced 911 systems. Wisconsin statute authorizes each county to enter into a contract for that countywide 911 system. A lot of times this happened back in the 1980s. You've likely revisited your county contract maybe 10, 15 years ago. I will say majority of you have probably not touched that county contract for at least the last 10 years. But that was really the mechanism for establishing, in particular, enhanced 911 services at the county level. And it took us about until 2016 to get each county established under an enhanced 911 system and providing those basic services within the county. So each of those county contracts does detail out non-recurring and recurring charges that are used to calculate that up to 40 cents 911 surcharge that I mentioned earlier. This is used to fund non-recurring charges associated with like the trunking and the central office equipment and things related to establishing the alley database. So again, very vendor, service provider specific costs. And then any recurring costs associated with maintenance and operation of that 911 system. So that county contract was established to not only identify those costs, but also establish the terms and conditions for that provider providing the county's 911 system today. With 2017 Wisconsin Act 59, which really initiated the implementation of statewide Next Gen 911 services, there was a provision within that act that required DMA to determine the Next Gen 911 operational date for each county. Obviously, this isn't relevant until we get a majority of our PSAPs or get a PSAP into a Next Gen 911 environment. So the last couple of years, we've been spending a lot of time, just getting PSAPs ready, working with those PSAPs and GIS authorities to get everybody into a position where they can implement an EZNet, in which case then, this operational date really becomes more important. And so I think that's why now we're really introducing this as a topic with 26 PSAPs live in this phase 1 process. This operational date process will really be impactful during phase 2. So under that Act 59, the statutes cited there on the slide as well, there are some responsibilities that are outlined for DMA. DMA is to determine each county's operational date in which Next Gen 911 becomes fully operational in the county. Operational date is defined in statute. Next Gen 911 is also defined in statute. So we really relied on how those were defined in state statute to establish what our responsibilities were and how we were determining that operational date for each county. When we do determine the operational date for each county, we're required to provide a 30-day notice to the county and the service suppliers operating in that county. Service suppliers are defined as a telecommunications utility that's operating in the county. So these are typically going to be your incumbent local exchange carriers. Sometimes it'll be a competitive local exchange carrier. Pretty much any telephone service that provided exchange services within your county at the time you established your county contract. They elected to participate in that county contract to be able to then bill that up to 40-cent fee. So when I mention service suppliers, I'm talking about the landline service providers that are participating in your county contract. On that operational date, the state statute says that the existing E911 contract will expire. And at that point, the service suppliers in the county can no longer charge customers the landline surcharge within that county, unless under specific circumstances. I think if they haven't recouped all of their non-recurring charges, they're able to continue to charge that landline surcharge until they've recouped those costs. But again, on that operational date, your enhanced 911 contract, typically, if you're not with AT&T, it's going to be with Frontier or CenturyLink, Brightspeed, Lumen, however, whatever their name is in your county. All of those specific contracts will expire, and anyone participating in that contract as a service supplier will no longer be able to charge that up to 40-cent landline surcharge. So as you can see, there's a lot of impacts to your local 911 contract when we determine this operational date. And so we took a lot of time to consider the impacts, consider at what point would a PSAP be classified as operational in NextGen 911. There's a lot of different definitions for NextGen 911 across not only our state, but also across the nation. So making sure that when we're establishing criteria for how we're determining that, that we're considering all of the other nuances that happen when we determine that operational date. Because obviously we don't want your existing E911 contract to expire before you're fully set up in, a NextGen 911 environment. So, I don't see the link. It's hidden in the blue bar at the bottom. There is a link to our operational date process document. So when you get the slides, if you're interested in reviewing that process document, it is linked within the slides. But generally, I wanted to just talk through what the criteria is for when we would determine a county is operational in NextGen 911. So the first is that the county, and I mentioned county specifically because the state statute only identifies the county and these county contracts. It does not mention any municipality run PSAP. It is specific to the county contract. So I'm not sure if there will be, if any, impacts to those run by like a city or a town or a village. But specifically when I'm talking about the operational date criteria, this is for county run PSAPs only. So the county is connected to and accepting live 911 calls from an EZNet. So that's your phase 1 process with AT&T, and will be capable of processing non-voice 911 calls when available. So that essentially means that you're not connected through a gateway and you're able to process all IP-based calls, not just voice calls. The second criteria is that all 911 calls in the county have been migrated from the selective router to an EZNet, or at least 12 months has passed since the first service supplier migrated from the selective router. As Troy mentioned, that phase 2 process can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. So obviously want to give time for that migration as OSPs are ordering their trunks, as they're configuring their networks to be able to migrate their traffic from the selective router over to the EZNet. We want to make sure we're giving enough time for that. And so in this particular case, the 12 months is applicable to the service suppliers or those landline providers that I referenced that are participating in your county contract. So that allows 12 months to pass, or all of your calls have been migrated past that phase 2 process. And last is the county has upgraded all necessary operational equipment at the PSAP to be NENA I3 compliant. I'm not aware of any vendor that is selling equipment that is not NENA I3 compliant, or at least hasn't claimed that it is NENA I3 compliant. So there's not much concern there as far as PSAPs upgrading their operational equipment. But we wanted to make sure that that was a criteria in case there were circumstances where PSAPs hadn't necessarily upgraded to be NextGen 911 compliant, but maybe migrated to the EZNet. So that is the third criteria, making sure that the PSAP equipment is operational in that NENA I3 environment. So all of this criteria must be met in order for DMA to determine the operational date for a county. To this point, we have only determined that operational date for one county. That was the first county to implement a NextGen 911 system in the state and has met that criteria. We continue to review those PSAPs that have implemented NextGen 911 and will continue this operational date process. As I mentioned, the process document does outline kind of what we do to determine that process outside of just this criteria. It involves a lot of phone calls, asking a lot of questions, making sure that we're understanding where you are from an operational perspective, making sure that, whatever vendors you're working with, in this case, AT&T or some other NextGen 911 provider, what capabilities they're offering to make sure that you are meeting this criteria before we're determining that operational date. And that's to, of course, allow time for that transition from the legacy system into the next 911 system and make sure that there are, minimal impacts when we are determining that operational date. We do not do any auditing related to those 911 fees. So once we do determine a county's operational date, we specify that the county contracts have ended, but we aren't going back and determining, are these service suppliers continuing to charge the landline fee or anything along those lines. It's just not a responsibility we have under statute. And so our responsibility is really determining when a county has met this criteria and then providing that 30-day notice. All right. I know that was really fast and a new topic, so please take that back, process it, review the process document if it interests you. And if you have any questions about this process, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are certainly happy to sit down and have conversations with you about this and what it might mean for your county if we have that information. But really just wanted to set provide some high level information about our operational date process. This will be something that as you're all going through your phase 1 and phase 2 transitions, this will become more and more relevant to you. And so wanting to make sure that we're giving you a heads up that this is something that will be coming along as we all make our next Gen 911 journey. So with that, I'll pause, see if there's any questions before we'll be passing it off for the ECATS demo. All right, awesome. Answered everyone's question, I'm sure. Okay. All right, well, Kim, thank you for joining on the ECAT side. The last portion of our presentation will be going through, I'll let Kim say what she's going through.
You can just say it.
Yeah, just so used to talking. All right, thank you. Oh, this is yours.
Thank you. This is going to be a little different because there's nothing on the screen here, but there's up in the front and in the back. So when I launch the actual dashboard, it might take me a moment to try to figure out exactly what I'm doing for the flow. But we're here to talk about ECATs. I know that Jessica, you talked about ECATs last month or the last session, so I'm not going to really talk too much about it other than with the standard reports, when you get your rollout, you're going to have your standard reports and text reporting if you are text enabled. Make sure that you have all your reports in your dashboard or in your user interface at the time of rollout. What we're seeing with a lot of our customers is that some of the reporting isn't what they expect. So we do have an ad hoc inside of the ECATS where you can create your own reports. We also offer training on that ad hoc reporting capability, but we also offer packages of different custom reports. As we've been working with our several of our other clients across the states, a lot of those reports that we're working on seems that a lot of the PSAPs want them. So we are actually beginning to roll out additional reports in our portal at no charge. And so you might see more reports being available to your PSAP, especially in the upcoming 2025. Any questions on that? I got the little handy dandy remote here. And again, Jessica probably covered all of these. We were just talking about CDR earlier with Todd on, making sure that all the CDR information is in the right format for ECATS to consume. You have that local data processor, the RDDM, that is collecting all your CDR information and sending it across the internet to the ECATS cloud. That CDR information is near real time, right? Because we don't collect the CDR data until after the call. And so typically, if you're running reports, and also when I start talking about the dashboard, we're receiving that data from your PSAP every 5 seconds. Sometimes it can be a little bit more frequent, but typically it's a 5-second interval. So a lot of our reporting and our dashboard, even though, we call it real time, it's near real time because there is that little bit of a lag there when we're collecting your data. Another announcement that I want to talk about today is that we are rolling out a new UI user interface for ECATS in 2025. We've listened to our customers and our portal has been dated. We've been listening to our customers, now that we have, all this new technology, we wanted to move forward with ECATS. So you're going to see that we have a new logo, a new emblem for ECATS. And so you'll see that when you're logging into your portal when we roll this out next year. Also, the look of your user interface is going to be completely different when you log in. Before, you just landed on your page to where you could select what reports you wanted to run, and you had to start selecting the criteria. Now you're actually going to have like a dashboard when you first log in. So you're going to be able to get more statistics right away when you're looking at your portal. Likewise, on the bottom, like in the dark box here, that's your dashboard. And across the top, you can also do different reporting. On the bottom, you're going to see all of your frequent reports that you just ran. So instead of having to go and recreate the report that you just ran yesterday, you can just go into your dashboard and select that report and run it again. You're also going to be able to, of course, create the reports to where they're just run automatically for you. We're also having drop downs. If you look at your portal today, all of your ECATS reporting, there's no rhyme or rhythm to what they look like when they're, in the left-hand panel. I've had to think about ARM. They're not in alphabetical order. They're not really grouped together in any meaningful way. So with the new portal, we've kind of grouped the reports together for like the type of reports, whether you're going to run a report on agents, for example, or call metrics, call volume, performance. We kind of group the reports together so that when you're looking for a report, it makes more sense to you. Any questions on that before I launch the dashboard? Again, this will be rolled out early, probably Q1 2025. So that's something to look forward to. I'm just going to log in here. To drag it across, do you know how to drag your window across? I'm used to the mouse. Oh. There you go. No other way. Okay, great. So I just logged into the portal, and what you're going to notice is that on your toolbar, you're going to have what's called the dashboard. When I first logged into the dashboard, it will take moments, to fully populate. I'm going to attempt to put this full screen. You know how to focus out a little bit on your window for the resolution? Yeah. I'm sorry. Here? No, it would have to be for the whole window.
Not wanting to do it while you're in full screen.
Okay. Yeah, you could do that. F11. There you go.
I see.
A bit more. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Technicalities. It looks really nice on a large screen. But when you log into the portal, this is a look that you might see. I think this is what we did as a standard for the state. Of course, this is for a statewide overview of what's happening throughout with your calls. So across the top, you're going to see that it's Wisconsin, it's the state statistics. So it's for the entire state that we're collecting data for. Right now, as we were talking earlier about the rollout of the EZNet, it's about 28% right now of the PSAPs that we're collecting data from. As we bring more online and that are available to the portal, it will be a very busier map because right now, a lot of the calls that we're seeing are down in the Racine area. Across the top, like I said, there's the state of Wisconsin, and I'm going to start from left to right. So you're going to see that you have your call statistics. You're going to see calls per hour, and also under that, calls per minute. These statistics are updated every 5 seconds or as we're receiving data from the PSAPs, right? The CDR data. Again, this is after the call. So a lot of this will be, a little dated, but only by 5 seconds. Then you're going to have your volume of calls in the graph next door to it. And that's an hour graph. So there's like a timer underneath each of the lines on the x-axis, and that updates every minute. There's no Y, but you can actually, see that volume is going up and down when it exceeds an average. Then next door to that, where you see the circles there, the rings, that's a call event timer. And what that is there's 3 rings. On the outer ring, it is the duration of the call. And it's the average of the calls that is receiving in that 5 seconds, right? So right now we're getting the 2 calls. So the duration of the call is on the outer band. The answer seconds is in the middle of the circle. So making sure that all the calls are answered within that threshold of 10 seconds. Now 15 seconds, excuse me, new standard. And then you can see the preparation in the inner circle. On these circles, on the graph, you're going to see like a band. It's a line on each of those circles, and that is a mean value. And we're averaging 60 seconds of calls that we're receiving throughout the state. And so that's just a mean value. Then we have the abandoned percentage. Again, this is going to be updated every minute. So any calls that are abandoned at PSAPs, we're also going to see that statewide. How many statewide calls have been abandoned? And that mean value at the state level is set for 15%. Once it reaches a threshold over 15%, it will turn that chart red. Then you're going to see the NINA and the NFPA standard for the 15 seconds of all calls are supposed to be answered within the 90-second. And if it exceeds, like right now, if it exceeds the 15 seconds, it's going to chart red. So it just gives a quick overview of, somebody's not answering their calls within that 15 seconds. Next door to that, we have a wireless graph, and that is also an hour. So we're going to see all the passive service, graph. So we're going to see all the calls that are wireless phase 1, wireless phase 2, residential, business, or other. And it just charts how many calls are coming in from the different provider class of service as we're receiving those calls. And that graph is an hour long, and it updates every minute, similar to the call volume. Then next door to that, we're going to see all of the major wireless providers, right? You're going to see Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and other. I know I mentioned Sprint, and we're thinking, well, Sprint was bought up by T-Mobile, but they're still considered a Sprint phone right now while they're migrating over to their new systems. So we are receiving Sprint calls. Then you're going to see a map view. Within the map view, we have a little legend in the corner. And so we are plotting the calls as we're receiving them on the map area. And you can see whether there are Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and other, or even a wireline, a landline call. And those are going to be a circle colored in purple. We can also see if the calls are wireless phase 2 or wireless phase 1. Wireless phase 2 are circles, and phase 1 calls are triangle. And then over in this other panel here, what we're representing are the individual PSAPs. We can actually view the top 20, the top 16. There's different layouts for the grid. Right now, I believe that I have the top busiest PSAPs. If I want to view an individual PSAP statistics, like I'll go to SOC. Because they have some abandoned calls. Okay, that's good. But anyways, I don't have my glasses on. Anyways, you can see that their call volume is similar to the statewide view, right? Their banner, but it's in a different order. At first I was like, that's just for confusion for me, but really it's to separate the fact that the top one is for the state and the ones on the bottom are for the individual PSAPs, kind of give it a different look. But they're also seeing all the same information that you're seeing across the top, except they're not seeing the calls per hour or their calls per minute. And their charts are actually updated a little slower than the statewide, because the statewide, we're doing like every 5 seconds, we're changing the graphs. Unless they're receiving a call, it will change within that 5 seconds, but we're not clearing out their banner except for every 60 seconds. Now it did zoom to the Wood County when I clicked on the PSAP name. If I want to go back to the statewide, I can just click Wisconsin in the top banner and it shrinks the last banner of Wood County and it zooms back out to the statewide. I can get additional information from the map itself on calls. Where's my mouse here? There it is. I can hover over a call on the map and I can see, you know, that what county that this call came in, the telephone number, the latitude and longitude, and also that's a wireless phase 1 call. If it was a wireless phase 2 call, I will also get the information of the provider. There we go. So that's an AT&T call. I mentioned that this legend bar graph, I can actually unselect different like types of calls. I can uncheck, you know, Verizon. If I just wanted to see all AT&T calls, I could uncheck everybody else besides the AT&T. If I just wanted to see my landline calls, I could uncheck all the wireless providers calls. If I didn't want to see phase 1 calls, I uncheck the box likewise. I go this way. Now I mentioned we can look at this in different views. So right now I expanded a little flyout on the bottom of the map, on the bottom of the dashboard. And this is for my user. So I can see data in a different way while I'm looking at this information. I keep losing my mouse because it's backwards. Okay. So right now I'm looking at the top 20. I can also look at the top 16. It changes the view a little bit. So, you know, it's giving you an option to look at your data in a different manner. I actually like the top 20, but if you like, you know, to see data in a different format, you can. You can just see the top 4, for instance, more of a map area. I'm going to go head back to the top 20. Right now, I'm looking at the top 20 that are the busiest in the state. If I wanted to change to the top PSAPs that have alerts, it will actually update the dashboard at that minute threshold. So it might take a second for it to refresh. But what I want to point out when it does the alert status in the top 20 is I wanted to mention the colored boxes across the top in the map view. Those are all the PSAPs that we're currently collecting data from, the CDR data. If they're in green, the status is good. They're receiving calls, we're receiving the CDR data. If it's colored in yellow in the top, they have some type of an alert. And typically that will be an abandoned call, but it could also be that they haven't received any data within a certain time frame. So like if, you know, like in an hour. So across the top now, it refreshed. All of the counties that are on the top, probably 8 boxes in the PSAP area, they all have alerts because we're not collecting data from them in the last hour. And those are really the backup PSAPs, or we just haven't implemented, the rollout for their data yet, but they're in our system right now. Another thing I wanted to mention is that in the PSAP view, we got the PSAP name and we also have their FCC ID. The PSAP names there are pretty long, and those are actually what you provided to ECAT's team when we started implementing your portal. And instead of having like Dane County Public Safety Communications, you might want to consider making it Dane CO PCS, right? Shorten the names a little bit just so that we can fit more in your map view, because sooner or later, we're not going to be able to put all of the PSAPs on that map view, but it's also an easy method for the state to go in and just click on a PSAP and get, a quick view of that PSAP boundary and information on that PSAP. So they're pretty lengthy, but that's up to you. I'm just making a suggestion. Again, I can go back to the busiest. Very strange working backwards. On that wall map, like I was saying, I can look at the FCC IDs, but typically they don't make any sense unless you have them memorized. They have a PSAP status icon. What this is just showing, like in the last hour, how many calls that you have had, and by what provider. I can actually go ahead and click and turn on the boundary of all of the PSAPs within the state. If I don't want to see them, if I want to see them, it's up to you. And again, this is just your view. You're not affecting what anybody else will be viewing. So if you actually want to utilize the wallboard, you can. With the marker life, that's the call icons that are in the map. You can clear them in a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, or leave them there for a whole hour. You can actually change your background theme. And I think this is, dependent on the size of screen that you might be looking at your dashboard, and also whether it's the daytime or the nighttime or the different hues that are in your communication center. But this is called standard. Of course, it's the white background and it's got a lot of color. Everything pops off of it. Anything that might have an alert, it has a light red background, so you know what their alert is. Like I've mentioned before, a lot of times they're the abandoned calls that are happening within that community. So the other color I had was dark. They have a forest, which is all right. And they also have a midnight, which I actually like, I prefer, but it's really up to you. There's this timestamp conversion. I'll be honest with you, I've been working with ECAT's team to try to find out what that means. And I still haven't received an answer, so I will get back to you on that one, because you will see it and you'll probably ask about it. Now, if I have a different map position, let's say I just want to see my jurisdiction, the state wants to see the statewide view, but you just want to really, focus on your individual PSAP. So you zoom your map in, maybe you have a different layout, so you have more of a map area, and your PSAP would be the focus of the banner. You'll still have the state stats, but then you can actually go ahead and save your map position. So next time you log into your portal, you'll be zoomed into your jurisdiction and you'll have a focus on your call statistics in your jurisdiction. A lot of people might be thinking, well, this is a great for statewide implementation. And yeah, I can probably see me utilizing it in my jurisdiction. Just over the last few weeks, we've gone, under Helene. I know it's not in our jurisdiction closely here, but now they're also now going to Milton. They're going to experience that. But if you're seeing an overview of your whole entire state and you're typically seeing a lot of call volume in a certain area, and all of a sudden you're not seeing any call volume, that's another way too that you're alerted that something's going on there. It might not be anything like, natural disaster. It could be man-made, right? Maybe we just lost our power, lost our CPE or something like that, but you'll get a quick overview of what could be happening in your jurisdiction. Are there any questions on the dashboard or even on ECATs?
I want to repeat it on the.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question was, is this going to be available in the 2025 version? It's actually available when you implement with AT&T ZNet and get set up with ECATs. There is a separate, I believe, Wisconsin dashboard button within the ECATs reporting system that then leads to this extra page. If you have access to ECATs and you don't have access to the dashboard, let us know. That should be activated for each PSAP that is live right now.
Correct. Are there any other questions? We take advantage of the portal. You know, what I like about ECATs just in general is that it is a cloud implementation, so you can take it wherever you are located, right? If you're traveling a lot and you're a director and you have the portal available, you can pull it up on your iPad, right? And you can just get a quick overview of what's happening in your, at your PSAP while you're away. But it does look nice on a wallboard within your jurisdiction. But if there's no other questions, I'm going to hand the mic back over to Jessica. If I can get down there. Like I said, it's backwards. You also have a little icon to log out of the portal. You can always just close down the page like you do with any other web page, but I suggest getting the best practices of logging out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Probably one of the most exciting things for me on this whole project, I would say. Great, this is. You said F11 for. Yep, okay. Just getting back to my presentation here. So as I mentioned, I think the ECATS reporting system is probably one of the most exciting things for the PSAPs in particular. I mean, getting a new 911 system is great with the next 911 and all of the other sort of capabilities that come with that. But I think for operational purposes, ECATS is probably going to be the most relevant to you all. That dashboard, as Kim mentioned, the state does have access to the ECATS dashboard. We're really using that for our statewide call reporting for like how many calls do we receive in a year, rather than go out to each and every one of you of the PSAPs to collect that information. We're able to just pull those reports through the ECAT system for that purpose. And otherwise, it's really just for us to monitor the health of the system, make sure everything is operating as we expected. But I think this will offer a lot more situational awareness, as Kim mentioned, for PSAPs that are looking and working with your neighboring PSAPs. Being able to see when a neighboring PSAP maybe is having a busier call volume, and when you can maybe expect to have some overflow from that PSAP if that's how you're set up. If there are no questions on the ECATS reporting system, when you do get access to it, you were able to set up like weekly or monthly or annual call summary reports. I did recently sign up for a call summary report that I get every day, just of all of the PSAPs that are on the AT&T ZNet, how many calls are going through that system. I think on average, it's about 1,700 calls per day with the 26 we have live. And then last month, we had over 50,000 calls going through the AT&T ZNet here in the state of Wisconsin. So really cool to see those statistics now coming online with the ECATS reporting system. And as PSAPs go live and continue to feed data into that system, we'll get a really good picture of how many 911 calls you all process on a daily basis, as well as on an annual basis, to really, again, just demonstrate all of the hard work that you all do every day. So with that, we are at the end of our presentation here. We did want to just open it up for any last minute questions. Wrapping up, our contact information is on the slide here, OEC staff at the top, and then moving down into the AT&T contacts here today. If you have any questions that you don't necessarily want to address here at the outreach session, we're always more than happy to set up individual calls to go through those more specific questions. This will be our last, likely our last, Next Gen 911 outreach session for the year. I just want to thank everyone who has been able to attend or participate online over this year. The last three sessions, I think it's been a great success. It is a lot of work to put into and get up and travel for these events. So I just did want to express appreciation for your time and the effort that you spend attending these sessions. So I'll pause here if there's any questions. Otherwise, we will be concluding. All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. I'll leave the contact information up for those on the phone if you're interested in copying that. Again, always here for any questions you may have, and just again want to thank you all for attending our Next Gen 911 sessions, and hope to talk to you all soon. Thank you.